I had been married to Amanda for 8 years, our life together seemingly perfect. We had a beautiful home, successful careers, and what I thought was a rock-solid relationship. But recently her behavior changed. New phone passwords, secret meetings with lawyers, and late nights away from home. Then I discovered she was collecting information about my assets. I decided to legally protect myself by moving what was rightfully mine. 2 weeks later, her plan completely backfired. Before I tell you how I uncovered my wife's scheme, let me know which state you are watching from, and hit subscribe so you do not miss real-life stories like this one. Amanda and I first met at a corporate networking event 10 years ago. I was immediately drawn to her confidence and sharp intellect. She worked in finance while I was building my career as a software engineer. After talking all evening, I finally gathered the courage to ask for her number. 2 years of dating followed, filled with adventures, deep conversations, and growing love. Our wedding was everything we had dreamed of. A spring ceremony in a picturesque garden with our closest friends and family. The early years of marriage were blissful. We purchased a beautiful home in a quiet suburb. Both of our careers were thriving, and we were financially comfortable. My position at a leading tech company provided a substantial income. Amanda also did well in her financial advisory role, though I earned considerably more. We maintained joint savings, but also kept some separate accounts primarily from before our marriage. I had inherited a significant sum from my parents, which I had invested wisely over the years. Every Friday, we would have date night trying new restaurants, or staying in with a bottle of wine. We traveled internationally, at least once a year. To everyone around us, we were the couple who had it all figured out. Our friends often joked that we should write a book about successful relationships. The first signs of change came about 6 months ago. Amanda began staying later at work more frequently. Our Friday date nights became sporadic, often canceled last minute due to her sudden commitments with friends I had never heard of before. When she was home, she spent most of her time on her phone, quickly ending calls whenever I walked into the room. If I asked about her day or these new friends, her answers were vague and dismissive. I started noticing her pulling away emotionally, no longer sharing the small details of her day that once connected us. Then came the password changes. First her phone, then her laptop, and eventually even her email. When I asked why she claimed it was for security purposes after a supposed data breach at her company, it seemed reasonable at the time, but combined with her other behavior, changes it planted seeds of doubt in my mind. I tried not to jump to conclusions. Every relationship has rough patches, and I was determined to work through whatever issues we were facing. I suggested a weekend getaway to reconnect, thinking some time away from our routine might help. Amanda declined, citing work commitments that could not be rescheduled. My next attempt was suggesting marriage counseling. I brought it up gently over dinner one night, saying that I felt we were drifting apart and might benefit from professional guidance. Amanda reacted defensively, insisting nothing was wrong and that I was being overly sensitive. She turned the conversation around, suggesting my concern was actually projecting my own dissatisfaction. Undeterred, I planned a romantic dinner at home. I spent hours cooking her favorite meal, bought her favorite wine, and set the table with candles. She texted she would be late, arriving almost 3 hours after dinner was ready. She barely touched the food, claiming she had already eaten with a client. Confused and increasingly worried, I confided in my best friend Jake. We met for drinks, and I shared everything that had been happening. Jake listened carefully before cautiously suggesting what I had been trying to avoid, thinking Amanda might be having an affair. While it was painful to consider, his suggestion made sense given her behavior. The definitive clue came unexpectedly. Amanda had left her laptop open when she went for a shower. I had never invaded her privacy before, but my growing anxiety pushed me to glance at her screen. There, in her email, was a message from a law firm, Brinkman and Associates. The subject line read, "Initial consultation follow-up." My heart raced as I quickly skimmed the email. It referenced their meeting and attached documents about state laws regarding asset division in divorce proceedings. I scrolled through her recent emails and found more exchanges with this firm dating back several weeks. In her documents folder, I found spreadsheets detailing my income savings investments and even my inheritance. She had been meticulously documenting our financial situation, focusing particularly on my assets. There was also a calendar entry for another meeting with someone named Howard B., scheduled for the following week. Before Amanda returned, I discovered one more damning piece of evidence: a digital copy of our state's regulations on property division during divorce. Specific sections about separate property commingled funds and high-asset divorce scenarios were highlighted. I quickly closed everything and moved away from the computer, my mind reeling with the implications. I needed to confirm my suspicions before taking any action. The following week, I told Amanda I had to work late, but instead, I waited outside her office. She left early that day and drove to an office building downtown. I followed at a safe distance and watched her enter a building that housed several businesses, including Brinkman and Associates, the law firm from the email. I waited in my car for over an hour until she emerged. My stomach knotted as my worst fears were confirmed. That evening, I researched Howard Brinkman online and discovered he specialized in what divorce attorneys call strategic divorces, or divorce planning, where one spouse prepares extensively before blindsiding the other. The next day, I carefully checked our bank statements and investment accounts. Amanda had been accessing all of our financial records, downloading statements going back years. She had even requested information about my retirement accounts and stock options from my company. My final confirmation came when I overheard a phone conversation. Amanda thought I was in the shower, but I had forgotten my phone and quietly returned to our bedroom. Through the closed door of her home office, I heard her clearly say, "Everything is in place. He has no idea what is coming." 2 more weeks should be perfect timing. I felt physically ill. 8 years of marriage, and now I was being strategically targeted by the person I trusted most. I needed advice from someone knowledgeable but trustworthy. The next day, I contacted Thomas, my college roommate, who had become a respected attorney. Though not specializing in divorce law, he would understand the legal implications of what I was facing. We met for lunch in a restaurant far from my usual haunts. After swearing him to secrecy, I laid out everything I had discovered. Thomas listened intently occasionally, asking clarifying questions. When I finished, he leaned back with a solemn expression. "What you are describing is classic divorce planning," he explained. "Unfortunately, I see this quite often. One spouse spends months gathering financial information and consulting with attorneys to position themselves advantageously before filing." Thomas outlined, "My options: confront Amanda, directly wait for her to file, and then respond or begin my own preparations. The first option risked alerting her that I knew, potentially causing her to accelerate her plans. The second left me vulnerable. The third, while distasteful, was the most prudent. I can refer you to Sarah Patterson," Thomas said. "She specializes in high-asset divorces and has dealt with situations like yours before. You need someone with her expertise." I met Sarah the following day. Her office exuded confidence and competence. After hearing my situation, she confirmed what Thomas had suggested: I needed to protect myself legally without tipping my hand. "Based on what you have shared, your wife is planning what we call an ambush divorce," Sarah explained. "She likely intends to file suddenly, hoping to catch you unprepared and emotionally vulnerable. This often leads to hasty decisions that favor the planner." Sarah outlined a strategy that was both legal and ethical. First, I needed to document which assets were truly separate property, particularly my inheritance. Under our state laws, inheritances received before or during marriage remain separate property unless commingled with marital assets. "You mentioned your inheritance was kept mostly separate," Sarah noted. "That is crucial. We can establish a trust for those funds, which offers legitimate protection. Additionally, we need to document exactly how much you contributed to joint assets compared to your wife." Sarah warned me against hiding assets or transferring property fraudulently. "Everything must be above board and legal. Our goal is not to cheat your wife out of fair division, but to prevent her from taking what is rightfully yours." I spent hours gathering documentation proving the source of my inheritance and tracking my contributions to our joint accounts. Sarah helped me establish a trust for my inheritance money, a completely legal move that would protect those funds in divorce proceedings. Throughout this process, I wrestled with my conscience. Late at night, staring at the ceiling while Amanda slept beside me, I questioned whether I was overreacting. Perhaps I had misinterpreted everything. Maybe there was an innocent explanation. One night I broke down. The weight of suspicion and secret planning became too much. I decided to give our marriage one last chance. The next morning, I asked Amanda directly if there was anything wrong, if she was unhappy in our relationship. I told her I felt something had changed between us and wanted to address any issues. Her response was dismissive. She accused me of being paranoid and creating problems where none existed. She refused to acknowledge any change in her behavior or our relationship. When I pressed further, she became angry and left for work earlier than usual. That was the moment I knew with certainty that my marriage was truly over. With that painful clarity, I finalized my preparations with Sarah. We carefully documented all relevant financial information. I moved my inheritance funds into the trust we had established. We prepared records showing my disproportionate contributions to our home purchase and joint investments. Sarah also advised me to maintain detailed records of all household expenses I was covering, and to continue normal financial behavior. Do not give any indication that you suspect anything, she cautioned. Continue paying bills as usual, and maintain your routine. These preparations took nearly 2 weeks to complete. They were the most difficult weeks of my life. Each morning I woke up beside a woman who was secretly planning to blindside me. Each evening I returned home to maintain a facade of normalcy. I felt like an actor in a bizarre play where only I knew the real script. With my assets properly documented and protected, I continued my daily routine, waiting for Amanda to make her move. I maintained our normal schedule, went to work, came home, and even suggested dinner out occasionally, which she usually declined. The tension in our house was palpable, though I did my best to act natural. My protective measures included moving my inheritance into a properly established trust. This money had come from my parents before our marriage and had largely been kept separate from our joint accounts. I also gathered extensive documentation showing my contributions to our home purchase, joint investments, and even household expenses over the years. I recorded dates, amounts, and sources of funds for major purchases and investments. I copied tax returns, bank statements, investment reports, and property records. Everything was meticulously organized and stored securely with Sarah, my attorney. Each day that passed felt like walking through quicksand. I maintained appearances with friends and colleagues, sharing nothing of the turmoil in my personal life. Only Jake and Thomas knew what was happening. Their support kept me grounded when I felt like I was losing my mind. Jake regularly checked in on me, offering a sympathetic ear when the strain became too much. "You are doing what you have to do," he reminded me. "This is not about revenge, this is about protecting yourself." Thomas provided legal reassurance when doubts crept in. "Everything you have done is completely legal and ethical," he emphasized. "You are not hiding assets or being deceptive about your finances. You are simply ensuring that separate property remains separate and joint property is fairly evaluated." Exactly 2 weeks after I completed my preparations, it happened. I returned home from work to find Amanda waiting for me in the living room, an envelope on the coffee table between us. Her expression was a mixture of determination and what appeared to be rehearsed regret. "Nigel, I want a divorce," she stated flatly. "My attorney has prepared the paperwork. I think we can make this simple if you cooperate." She pushed the envelope toward me. "These are the terms I am proposing. I believe they are fair." I took the envelope without opening it. "I see," was all I could manage to say. Despite knowing this was coming, the actual moment still felt like a physical blow. "I have given this a lot of thought," Amanda continued, her tone businesslike. "I think we both know this marriage has not been working for some time. I would prefer to keep this amicable and private." I nodded slowly. "When did you decide this?" "Recently," she lied smoothly. "I think we have grown apart, and it is best to end things before we start resenting each other." Later that evening, I reviewed the divorce papers with Sarah over the phone. As expected, Amanda was asking for half of everything, including assets that were legally mine alone. She wanted half of my inheritance, stock options, and retirement accounts, plus our house, and a substantial alimony payment. The news of our impending divorce shocked our social circle. Friends called and texted, expressing surprise and offering support. Many asked what had happened to our seemingly perfect marriage. I kept my responses vague, unwilling to discuss the details. 3 days after receiving the divorce papers, Amanda and I had our first meeting with our respective attorneys. Howard Brinkman exuded confidence as he outlined their proposed settlement. He emphasized how generous Amanda was being by not demanding more than half of our assets. Sarah listened politely, taking notes without revealing our strategy. When Brinkman finished, she calmly requested a complete disclosure of all financial documents from both parties as required by law. Brinkman agreed, clearly expecting this standard procedure. The turning point came a week later at our second meeting. Sarah presented our documentation, clearly establishing which assets were separate property and detailing my contributions to joint assets. She highlighted the trust containing my inheritance and provided irrefutable evidence that these funds had been kept separate throughout our marriage. I watched as Brinkman reviewed the documents, his confidence visibly diminishing. He whispered something to Amanda, whose expression changed from smugness to shock to anger in rapid succession. "You knew," Amanda finally said, looking directly at me. "You knew I was filing for divorce." I met her gaze evenly. "I suspected something was wrong when you started acting differently. I found evidence of your planning. I simply took steps to protect what was legally mine." "You went through my computer," she demanded, voice rising. "You left it open," I replied calmly. "But more importantly, you were documenting my assets for months, planning to take what was not rightfully yours." Brinkman tried to regain control of the situation. "Regardless of how we got here, we need to focus on the settlement. Perhaps we need to reconsider some aspects of our proposal." Sarah responded with professional courtesy but firm resolve. "Yes, I think that would be appropriate. As you can see, many of the assets included in your proposal are separate property and not subject to division. Additionally, the contributions to joint assets were not equal, which needs to be reflected in any settlement." The meeting ended with Brinkman requesting time to consult with Amanda and revise their proposal. As we packed up our documents, I caught Amanda staring at me with a mixture of anger and something that looked almost like respect. Outside the building, Sarah gave my shoulder a supportive squeeze. "You did well in there. They clearly did not expect you to be prepared. Now they know we have a strong position, and that will significantly influence negotiations moving forward." 2 days later, we received a revised proposal from Brinkman. The new terms excluded my inheritance and reduced claims on my retirement accounts and stock options. The request for alimony was substantially lowered. While still not entirely fair, it was a dramatic shift from the original demands. The final confrontation with Amanda happened unexpectedly. I came home to collect some clothes and found her sitting in our kitchen. She asked me to sit down, and for the first time in months, she seemed willing to have an honest conversation. "How long have you known?" she asked. "About 3 months," I admitted. I saw the emails from Brinkman, the spreadsheets tracking my assets, the research on divorce laws. Amanda was quiet for a moment. "I started planning about 10 months ago," she finally confessed. "I felt trapped in this marriage. I wanted a fresh start with enough financial security to never worry again." "You could have just asked for a divorce," I pointed out. "Why the elaborate scheme?" "Because I wanted more than a fair share," she admitted with surprising candor. "I wanted enough to start completely over. My friend Lisa got half of everything in her divorce last year, including assets her husband had before they married. I thought I could do the same." Her honesty, while painful, provided a strange sense of closure. We agreed to proceed with the divorce as fairly and efficiently as possible. The ambush had failed, and now we were just two people untangling their lives. The negotiation process took another 2 months. With the initial strategy exposed, Amanda and Brinkman adopted a more reasonable approach. We worked through asset division methodically, focusing on fairness rather than advantage. The final agreement reflected our actual contributions. I retained my inheritance, the majority of my retirement accounts, and most of my stock options. We sold our house and divided the proceeds based on our respective contributions to the down payment and mortgage. Amanda received a fair portion of our joint investments and savings. Signing the final divorce papers was surreal. 8 years of marriage reduced to signatures on legal documents. As we left the courthouse, Amanda paused. "I am sorry it ended this way," she said, not quite meeting my eyes. "So am I replied honestly. "For what it is worth, I did love you, at least in the beginning." I nodded, unsure what to say. We parted ways on the courthouse steps, heading in different directions literally and figuratively. The first months after the divorce were challenging. I moved into a modern apartment downtown closer to my office. The space felt empty and impersonal compared to our house, but it was also free from painful memories. I threw myself into work, initially taking on additional projects and working late. My colleagues noticed the change but respectfully gave me space. Eventually, Jake intervened, concerned I was using work to avoid processing my emotions. "You need to actually deal with what happened," he insisted one evening, practically dragging me to a support group for recently divorced individuals. I went reluctantly but found unexpected comfort in sharing experiences with others who understood exactly what I was going through. The group became a regular part of my routine. Through their guidance and support, I began rebuilding my life. I reconnected with old hobbies, joined a hiking club, and even started training for a half marathon, something I had always wanted to do, but never made time for during my marriage. 6 months after the divorce, I was approached by 2 former colleagues with a startup idea. They needed someone with my technical expertise, and were offering a partnership position. After careful consideration, I decided to take the risk. The startup gave me a new focus and purpose beyond just surviving day to day. Gradually, I opened myself to new relationships. I dated casually at first, taking things slowly and being more mindful about the foundations of a healthy partnership. I was more aware of red flags and more assertive about my own needs and boundaries. Through therapy and self-reflection, I came to understand that while Amanda's methods were wrong, our marriage had problems long before she began planning the divorce. We had both failed to communicate effectively. We had prioritized the appearance of a perfect relationship over addressing underlying issues. The most important lesson from this experience was about financial independence within relationships. While sharing lives and building together is important, maintaining some separation and awareness is equally vital. I learned that trusting blindly, even in marriage, can leave you vulnerable. I also gained perspective on forgiveness. Initially, I was consumed with anger toward Amanda. Over time, I realized holding on to that anger only hurt me. Forgiving her was not about excusing her actions, but about freeing myself from the burden of resentment. Today, 2 years after the divorce, I lead a very different life. Our startup is thriving. I have a small but close circle of genuine friends, and I have recently started a promising new relationship with someone who values honest communication above all else. I no longer view my divorce as a failure, but as a painful, yet necessary chapter in my life story. It taught me resilience, self-advocacy, and the importance of balancing trust with self-protection. The experience forced me to reevaluate what I truly wanted from life and relationships. Life rarely follows the path we expect. Sometimes the most painful detours lead us to destinations we never would have discovered otherwise. My journey continues, and for the first time in years, I am genuinely excited about what lies ahead. Have you ever had to protect yourself from someone you thought you could trust? How did you balance being fair with looking out for yourself? Share your experiences in the comments below. If this story resonated with you, please hit that like button and subscribe to hear more real-life stories about overcoming betrayal and finding strength in difficult situations. Thank you for listening, and remember, sometimes the end of one chapter is just the beginning of a better one.